because the best conversations are always had before the podcast starts.
I
And I
agree
feel
with
like it's
you.
very unfair to the audience.
I agree with you. I
You
agree
know,
with you. It's
it's
so nice
very
to
unfair to the
connect.
audience. Oh my gosh, I'm such a big fan.
Thank
And,
you. Thank you
you
very
know,
much.
we have this common friend, Chase Tuning, who y'all should know. Maybe I should even have him on my podcast.
Yeah.
Uh, but he's like this great person. And it's almost like he says, oh, you should meet Joe Sheehey. And I was like, and then he started to almost say something about you. And I said, no, you don't need to tell me anymore. If you say I should know him, then I should know him. And then I went and did some research and I was like, oh, Chase for the win, as per usual, as per usual. But you kind of
Amazing.
remind me of him in this way. And then I want to hear all about you, which is I think he is so rooted in the truest definition of altruism,
Hmm.
right? Which means connecting and in my opinion, connecting and giving without really thinking about your receiving. And
Right.
I think when people are like that, really good things happen to them. I'm working on that.
I completely agree with you. Every time I talk to Chase, I mean, Chase and I have been friends for wow, almost 5 years now,
Mm.
since really when I was starting the company. And I've always said he's kind of like the nucleus, like he's an
Oh
expert
my goodness.
connector.
I know.
He's like, oh, like I know this person, you should know this person, you should know this person. And at first, sometimes it's like, oh, like why should we connect? And then what? And then
Isn't that
it ends
sad
up
that that's
being,
how we are? I'm like, well, what
I
does he
know.
want for it? And he doesn't.
Yeah.
He just wants us to know really good. I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if the world was sort of like that?
It
He's
would.
made me
It would
more
be
like
very.
that. He's made me more like that in my friendship with him. He really has. So you seem wonderful. And I want to hear, let's start from the beginning. I mean, what a amazing story here. Bodybuilding, aerospace engineer, now owning this really amazing company. I really, there's so many places that we connect and our audience connects with you. So where you want to start?
Yeah. I mean, I think the best place to start is just really like why am I doing what I'm doing? I think that on my own podcast, I started asking guests. I said and then asked, I said, sometimes I think that like when we just think about the what, we're like, what do you do? I think it's
Mm.
very surface level. And so I love that you ask, um, I love that you lead it to where it's like a why. Why do you do what you do versus what do you do?
That's
Because
all
at
that
the
matters.
core,
Yeah.
what ends up showing up, right? But it's really why you do it. And
I'm already in love with this podcast.
yeah, it's like my journey it has not been like a typical journey. If you look at my background, I spent 7 years working for Lockheed Martin in their NASA division, working on interplanetary space missions as an engineer. And most of the time when I say that, people are like, wow, like that's so cool. And I agree, it was really amazing. We did incredible uh projects and missions, and I contributed to them. But the reason that I ended up there was because I was following the supposed to's of society.
Mm.
And I love my parents deeply, and I ended up where I ended up because I thought that the status of being an engineer, the status of working in corporate America and playing the safe route was what I was supposed to do. But I don't know if I was ever asked if that's what I wanted to do.
Mm.
Um, and it's to nobody's fault, right? It's like I think so many of us follow this path in life where we're like, this is what I thought I was supposed to do, this is what I thought I was supposed to do. And when I got to that place, I thought I was supposed to feel different.
Mm.
And when I found myself in the corporate America environment after what was a very difficult time in my life, a time of severe depression, ending college and almost ending my own life,
Mm.
I was like, I was like, still, this is not the thing. Like, I checked all the boxes. I made it through a very difficult time in my life. I almost ended my life, and I rebooted my life or restarted my life to ensure that I did make it to this place, to ensure that I did make it into a position that, one, I had worked so hard for, but two, I thought had this status that would would make me feel fulfilled.
Mm.
And and I didn't. I just didn't at all. And I felt like I had no tangible impact on other people. And when I say no tangible impact on other people, the reason that I recognized that was in experiencing an extreme bout of depression in my last year of college, and then for a year or two afterwards, and being able to work through that, being able to reboot and restart my life and start to form a different way of living, even though I was still kind of locked in a position that I didn't want to be in. I noticed that I could actually change my life. I could actually start to live a different life by by actually like being inquisitive and asking myself what I really wanted.
Mm.
And that led to me being an entrepreneur on the side while also being an engineer. And that didn't really work either because I couldn't put all of my effort into actually building a business. And I was pursuing, as you mentioned earlier, I was pursuing a bodybuilding competing career, and I was also an engineer. I was going to say 9 to 5, but it was more like 7 to 6 some days or most days and weekends. And I was like, this is just not working for me, because on the other end, I was moonlighting and trying to teach people to change their physical body. As I figured out how to change my physical body, I wanted to help other people do it, because I recognized as we learn things in life and we start to change our own lives, it's really selfish to not want to share that with other people. And it's also a very lonely place. Like, what if we change our life, but we continue to surround ourselves with the same people that are not on a path of wanting to change and grow? And that's just going to pull you down. So you have the responsibility, and I have the responsibility to want to give to other people. Like, oh, I can change my life, so I want to help other people change their life. And I was just wrestling between two worlds for a while. I was trying to, have this side hustle and then also progress in my engineering career. And about 7 years into engineering, it all came to a head when I recognized that, one, I probably wasn't, my heart wasn't there anymore. And two, I was just at this place where I was being belittled by bosses, and then also finding myself being depressed again.
Mm.
And after having being depressed and almost ending my life at the end of college, you learn, I should say, a lot of us learn
Yeah, you
through
learned. I've been a therapist a long time.
I should say a lot of us learn
And some of
that
us.
some of us learn, I should say.
Yeah,
Some
I think
of
you might
us
be undercutting yourself really significantly already, but let's keep going.
some of us learn that it's just like we have to take full responsibility for what our life turned out to be. And that doesn't mean that if difficult things happen to us or traumatic experience happens, that it was all our fault. But what it does mean is that we have responsibility to work through that and to understand it, and to understand why we show up in the world the way we do with protective mechanisms or addictions or whatever it may be. And then also recognize in life later on, when we start to feel depressed again, or if we start to feel our mental health slipping, can we recognize a pattern? And the pattern for me was, in college, I wanted to be one person. I said I was one person, but I actually wasn't showing up as that person. So there's a huge dissonance between who I said I was and who I wanted to be and who I actually was. And I noticed for me that my anxiety that led to depression was just that dissonance. And
Mm.
as I approached the end of my engineering career, that dissonance was coming up again. I didn't want to be where I was anymore, but I was looking for permission from the outside world to actually change my life. And the only permission that I was going to get and was able to get was going to come from myself. And as I found myself start to slip into depression again, I went and saw a therapist, and I said, hey, like, I have this idea of building this company. There's there is a huge stigma around what I would like to do.
Mm.
And I don't know how to talk about it publicly, but I have other people in my life talking about similar experiences with using cannabis to help with their mental health state, to help with calming, to help with sleep. And then there's just like this huge stigma. And I said, like, I know that I can create something that just allows conversations that tend to stay in the dark
Yeah.
to come to light. Just like, a lot of us, when we share our depression stories for the first time, we're like, oh, like people are going to think differently about me. And then you share them, you're like, oh, people trust you more. People
Oh
want to know
yeah.
about you
People are
more.
like, thank you.
Like, thank you. Like, oh,
Thank
we're the
you.
same. And
Yeah.
so when I found myself in that therapist's office 7 years into my engineering career, he's like, hey, Joe, like, I hear that you have a desire for your life to be different. And I hear that you have ideas of what that might look like. And I also see that you're still in this same routine, this trap of showing up and doing what you think you're supposed to do. And like, you're looking for permission from the outside world. And he pulled this card out of his desk. I still have this card on my desk. It's his business card, but on the back of it, he just wrote permission and he hands it to me. And
Oh
he
God.
goes,
Do
Joe,
I
like,
love that guy.
I'm so do I. And I like, I need to write him a letter here soon because I speak about this story a lot. But he just said, Joe, like, you're looking for permission from everywhere but yourself. I know you're not going to come back as a client, but I'm going to give this to you solely because you need to give this to you. And that night I put in my letter of resignation in my engineering position. And the next day I woke up and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have an idea of what I want to create. And I basically, jumped off the proverbial entrepreneurial cliff and like built my plane and wings on the way down. And now we're here. And I've, 5 years later, built a company that is a supplement company, but it's really focused on pushing the edge
Yeah, I
of
wouldn't call it a supplement
supplementation.
company. I think that's a real insult, to be honest.
I say a supplement company of the future. Like, I think that this is what the future looks like. I think
I
that the
call it like a
future.
healing company.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that supplement is sort of with wellness,
Yeah.
just move on. This is just
Hey,
like
well, I
next level
like you a
stuff.
lot.
I'm very few people have neutrality around me, so that's good. I have so
You
many
get us out of our
questions.
own way already. Or
I
you
have
get me out of my
so
own
yeah,
way.
well, once a therapist, always a therapist.
Yeah.
I have so many questions because
Yeah.
we're basically in the heart of what this podcast is about, which is what you're craving, right? Which is how we don't turn to addictions and all this stuff. And like, I am so curious about this micro level of how you did all of this. Let's make sure we put a pin in the idea that we want to talk about your company because I'm actually
Yeah.
very obsessed with it. I don't know if you know this about me, but I like haven't taken an Advil in 15 years. I was on
It's
every
beautiful.
psychotropic in the entire world in my youth, and I've given up on that line of reasoning. And so I'm so excited to start talking about this stuff. And I don't know, I love what you're saying about how taboo it was to start talking about this. And I just think it's fascinating how okay it is to talk about Haldol and how
Yep.
okay it is to talk about Zoloft and how it isn't okay to talk about all of these plant medicines. It's like, anyway, did you watch the Michael Pollan documentary?
Yeah. Yeah. I read his book years ago when it first came out, and that
It's
book is
called How
so
to Change Your Mind. I'll
yes.
put it in the
Yes.
show notes.
Yes. If you haven't watched it on Netflix, you have
It's a
to,
real must listen,
after you
watch,
listen to this
read.
podcast tonight, whenever it is, like, you have to dive into his work because he, as a incredible author and journalist, puts all the information out there that you need to, one, change your mind on plant medicine, but also like understand how through plant medicine and these modalities we can actually change our mind.
Yeah.
And
In fairness,
yeah.
also, I have to say the first episode where he talks about the political underpinnings of why everybody's opposed to plant medicine was really the game changer for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a sober person. And, it's like, so there's a lot of stigma around plant medicine and all this stuff in the sober communities too, but there's no stigma about big pharma. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is where I sit with it. Like, I'm fascinated by what like big advertising, because, I'm obviously like an insane person about big food and big food culture and all of that.
Right.
And so it's just, to me, it's all converging together, the simplest things that you can't really market, even though you do a great job. Meditation, yoga, breath, plant medicine, cannabis, like all this stuff is just, it's much less exciting.
It
Um,
is. It
much less
is. And there's
exciting.
just like, we have to ask, like we started the podcast, like why did we end up here?
Mm,
And a lot of people ask me when I talk about cannabis, I say, well, you know what, since the late 1800s,
mm,
early 1900s, there has been a message. If you want to call it propaganda, you can. I agree with you, but if you don't want to, you can call it what it is. There's been a narrative around specifically cannabis since the early 1900s, late 1800s, and my parents, older generations, they've just been in a narrative. And so,
mm,
like, you can't, I think that we can all understand how powerful narrative is. The stories that we tell ourselves and
to
the
say the
stories that
least.
we are told
Yep.
from young ages. And so to break to break down a narrative is very difficult. And the only way we can do it is by having nuanced conversations. Because I'll also sit here and I'll say, like, I mean, the reason I'm on this path and I skipped over it is I was put on antidepressants right away, right
Oh
when I
God, you
tried
and
to
I could
kill
talk about
myself.
this all day. Hmm.
And things actually got worse for me in the short term. And it was my responsibility. I was still drinking alcohol. I was still like, so for me, I just have to take full responsibility for that. And I have to say that I grew up with opening up a cabinet and looking in the cabinet, and all I saw was orange bottles with white lids.
Yep.
And I never knew any different, but I always asked why. I'm like, why is this the case? And then when I was put in the same situation where I was like, oh, like that's why. This is why this happens. It's there's no other conversation, there's no other thought process. It's just like this is the answer. And
Yep.
so
I
my
remember.
mission
Yeah.
is to change that. My mission is to have the conversations that are nuanced, that allow us to um hear and understand why we think the way we do, and share my experience and share the experience of now over 105,000 of my customers. Like we have hundreds of thousands of customers, and we're helping every single one of them pursue an alternative route.
Yeah. And I think just like big time therapist hat on, which is that the answer is never the opposite. It's always the balance. Like I've seen amazing things happen with psychotropics, but I've also, I mean, personally and professionally, had the same thing happen to me. I was drinking my face off. And I remember going to the psychiatrist and him just saying, like, yeah, I'm going to put you on one more med. And I walked out of the office and I called my mother's best friend who's also was an MD and a homeopath. And I said, I'm just going to kill myself. Like, I cannot do this one more minute. I wasn't in any way honest about the other things I was putting in my body that were
Yeah.
fueling my depression. And she said, do you want to try to do some alternative? No, that's not what she said. How about before you kill yourself, we try some other things? And I mean, I think I have a lot of suicidality in my story, and exact opposite of it. I also have a lot of life. I want to be here. Every time I've been at those turning points where I could take my life or stay, I always have chosen to stay. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. But the alternative things have really more suited me. And that to me is my story. And then I worked in psychiatric hospitals and seen lithium and Depakote work absolute miracles. I've seen
Hmm.
antipsychotics work absolute miracles. I think all of this toxic tribalism is really what gets us in trouble, and that's
Yeah.
the word nuance that you're using is so perfect. Can
Yeah.
we talk about your core for a second while we're here?
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
some light conversation on a Friday afternoon, or it's the morning where you are. Um, okay. So when you had that depression, like what happened? Like the first round? Like what happened? How did you ask for help? Like what did you know to be true? You were like in high school, like a man in high school. Like
Yeah.
what'd you do?
I didn't know how to ask for help. So what ended up happening was, and I actually, before the first time I tried to commit suicide, I had been in therapy, but the therapy started at a place where, since a very young age, I had learned that the only way for me to be enough in this world was to prove myself and to
Mm,
work myself to death,
produce.
to produce.
Yeah.
And
Me too, by the way.
not to anybody's fault, my dad growing up, he's an airline pilot. So he's gone for 5 days, home for 3, gone for 5, home for 3. And like, as the eldest and the oldest son, like I was supposed to be the man of the house. And so when my dad came home, like the perfect lines in the lawn, the grades, the sports, everything, like I wanted my dad's love so bad. And that's the only way that I knew how to get it. And of course, that's a story for so many people. And I just say that because when I saw a therapist for the very first time, the first thing that I said was, I just feel like I have a voice in my head. And he goes, whose voice is that? And I couldn't recognize that it was like a voice that I was putting on my dad. That was a voice that I was putting on my parents. I just knew this voice of like, you're not doing enough. You need to do more. You keep like, that was
You're
just like this
unlovable, right?
crazy, you're unlovable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, at the core, there's there's a lot there. And so I guess I was kind of asking for help. You said, how did you ask for help? I said, I just like, I'm driving myself crazy because I am like wrestling with this voice in my head and these thoughts in my head. And so it was like very surface level therapy for the first couple of years. But when it got to college and I was, so many kids go to college, it's this melting pot of different backgrounds, different ways of growing up, different cultural experiences, different familial experiences. And you're 18 years old and nobody knows what they're doing. They're just like,
Oh my
like,
God. I know.
and so I found myself 5 out of 7 days of the week partying and really numbing myself out. I knew like I can look back at it now and I was like, I can see that I had hatred towards myself then. And it was for so many reasons, just like not thinking that I could ever be lovable, just like you said. And I didn't really get anywhere in those first rounds of therapy. And then that it was years later where um, I screamed for help, but not vocally. It was, I'm done. I'm going to end my life. And when I did climb over that guardrail of the bridge, I was actually coming out of a blackout. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in Boulder, Colorado. There was this man underneath the bridge. What he was doing there, I have no idea, but he just said, don't do it. And he ended up pulling me back over the guardrail. And my girlfriend at the time was following me home. We were at a party late at night and I was just one, I was so insecure. I saw her talking to this other guy and I was making up this story in my head that like she wanted to be with this guy and I wasn't enough. So I would drink myself numb and then I was just like, I'm out of here. I'm done. And I can remember like coming in and out on the walk home, like walking, stumbling through a ditch and then like walking out of the ditch. And then like there was this bridge on my way home and I was like, I just don't want to feel like this anymore.
Yeah.
And recognizing that when I look back on it, and really the next day, when my girlfriend walked me home, I took a handful of Xanax. The next day, I woke up and I was like, I don't remember anything. And my parents were standing over me. I was in a hospital bed. The doctor was asking, we're going to run some tests. What are we going to find in your system? And the prior 2 weeks had been music festivals in Miami, and my friends in Boulder were the biggest drug dealers in the city. And so I was just like, my parents recognized that not only did they almost lose their son, but their son had completely lost himself. And so you ask, like, how did I ask for help? I didn't ask for help. Was just like,
You acted for help.
that here I acted. And yeah, I was put on antidepressants right away and continued to drink. I wasn't doing other drugs. And I started to go, I saw a psychiatrist for a while, and then that just like wasn't really working for me. And then I ended up seeing um another therapist that really, his name's Joseph, and we were both named Joseph, and he really helped me be who I am today. He helped me survive, and we did a lot of CBT and EMDR, and
My love
that was
languages.
years. That was years
Yeah,
of
but it
work. And
so
so
speaks to finding the right person. I'm a crazy person about this because I think people settle in with especially coaches, therapists who like don't fit them and they make it that there's something wrong with them, right? Like you're sitting with a
Right.
coach, you're like, oh my gosh, like we're not connecting. What am I doing to make this not connect? And I think there's plenty of helpers out there who are not necessarily in it and maybe don't even know for the right reasons. And you can really turn a conversation quickly as a solid therapist or a coach to sort of shame the person. What are you doing wrong? Who am I reminding you of? As opposed
Mm,
to a therapist or a coach that really thinks about, wow, like what am I contributing here that's making it not work too? Or maybe it just isn't working. Not everybody's for
mhm,
everybody. I love your
mhm.
therapist, Joe.
Yeah.
So this idea of, I have one more question. I have to ask it
Yeah.
because when I'm so curious,
I'm
and
an open book. So,
I mean, you are my love language. When you had that second bout of the depression, I worked with a shaman and he used to always say that depression is the stop sign of the soul. And I'm so
mm,
reminded of that in your story. So how did maybe you did, but you're saying in that second bout of depression, you're like, okay, like got to go back into therapy. Like I can change my life. Did you ever have a moment where you like were upset, like, or were you personalized? Like, I just know this with eating disorders, when someone has a lapse in their behavior, at least in my experience with people, it's usually taken very personally. Like, what's wrong with me? Why did I do this again? What happened? And certainly with feelings, like,
mhm.
did that happen for you? Or were you just like, oh, okay, hey, depression, what's up? Let's go see Joe again. Love ya.
No, no. And the day that I did end up calling the therapist, and to be honest, like my mom, I called my mom too, and my mom was like, "You have to go see somebody again." And I said,
Mm,
I know." But right before I called her, I was sitting in traffic on the highway, and I was slamming my fists on my steering wheel, like, "How
mm,
can you possibly be here again? Like, what led you to that place before, this place before. How could you?" I mean, you nailed it on the head. It's like, how could you let yourself do this again? And really, I mean, it's just like I was living I was living for everybody but myself, but I couldn't recognize that at the time. And so the reason that I was there again was because, again, like I said, it was just like I was just living for everybody but myself. And I was doing, oh, like, you have to go get this job. I had a girlfriend at the time that we moved, and I like took the first available position. And what I
mm,
didn't mention was, over this career of engineering, I started working 32 hours per week after I recognized that I couldn't handle like the full-time load and build a business. So I figured out how I could start to work more part-time and then build my business. But I went back to full-time to get my girlfriend and I to a new living situation. I took the very first job that I could get.
Like the scarcity of it all. Yeah.
It was this it was, and then of course I'm like, I made all these decisions for us. Like, how could you be frustrated with me? It's like,
Yeah, how
and
dare
like I
you?
still do that.
Oh,
Like,
I mean, who
like
doesn't? Come on now.
um
We're not
so
saints, friend. We're just actualizing,
we are, and we just it the only it just all starts with, have you read the book Awareness by Anthony DeMello?
Oh, I love Anthony DeMello, but I've never read that book, but I'm gonna put it in the show notes.
It's so good. But
I mean, count me in. Can I listen to it? I'm so into that right now. It's like walking my
yeah,
dog. I
I think
love
you can.
Anthony DeMello. And I talk a lot in the show about codependency. Don't love labels, but he's actually like a real good codependency guy. He's
Yeah.
really good.
Well, and that's,
What's that book he
you
wrote about the birds in the cage? Isn't that him?
yes,
That's
I
a
don't
great
remember the
book.
title of it,
It's a
but yeah,
great
I mean,
book
he
because it's like an oracle. You can just turn to a page and he'll just change your life. He's got great
yeah,
YouTube also. Have you ever seen his YouTube talks? Oh,
yeah. He tells the story about the eagle, and the eagle that grew up with chickens, and the entire life the eagle did everything that the chickens did and walks around as a chicken. And one day towards the end of the eagle's life, the an eagle flies over, and the other eagle says, "What is that?" And the chicken goes, "Oh, that's an eagle."
mhm.
And then the eagle ended up living and dying as a chicken still, not
Mm,
knowing that it was actually an eagle. And it's because of the stories that we tell ourselves that we end up becoming who it is we are. And if we don't, like, the book is named Awareness because if we don't first have awareness, we can't actually start to change our life. And the
yeah.
only reason I could talk to my mom and say, like, I know I need to go see another therapist, because I did have the awareness of like, okay, I've been here before. I know that there has to be something that I'm doing that's contributing to this. I just have like that inkling of awareness. And the thing about awareness is the first time you start to become aware, it hurts so much that it's very easy for most of us, including myself. And it's exactly what I have done, is just to like retreat, because the
Mm.
awareness hurts. And you're like, well, that hurts too much to
Well,
go
people are
further that
so
way.
scared of pain. I mean, emotional pain. People are willing to go into this just, rot, I don't know, sleeping system before just to feel excruciating pain, which is so temporary. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah.
Please keep
Well,
going with your
I mean,
genius.
it's it's beautiful that you say that, because in that book, it's the amount of times that Anthony says, wake up, wake up, wake up,
Mm.
like wake up, wake up, wake up, like you are asleep. And so many people just want to just go back to sleep. So it's
That's
like
what
you get the
addiction is in its
awareness.
own way, isn't it? Right? I mean,
Hmm.
at least I'll tell you, at least I have all addictions, but my food addiction in so many ways is that, like,
Yeah.
I cannot deal. I cannot deal. I cannot deal. And I
Yeah.
can deal.
Right.
And by the way, I don't know about you, and I'm so curious about like the routines and the things you do, but when I do deal, I mean, the fortification of my spirit and like my knowledge of what I am capable of doing. And I don't mean that in any of the cash and prizes sort of way. I actually mean it in the way you're talking about in the service, giving back, being available way is, and I didn't even know. I mean, I just wanted to like not kill myself, maybe stop binging and trying to kill myself all the time. But
Yeah.
the longer you go through that ritual of, okay, I'm actually going to tolerate the pain. I'm going to stay awake. I'm going to stay awake. It's like the whole thing makes me want to cry. I could talk to you all day. And we're also talking
Yeah.
about Joseph Campbell, aren't we?
Exactly.
That's what I was
Yeah.
looking up. If you're watching YouTube, I'm sitting here finding that quote.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I mean, it's, Joseph Campbell, and like the hero's journey is like the first time that you meet the mentor, you're not ready to meet the mentor. The first
Right.
time that you gain awareness, the first time that something's put in front of you to say, like, hey, first time that mirror is actually put in front of you, and you're like, okay, ouch, I don't want to look at that mirror. I'm going to break that mirror and I'm going to go the other way. That is, it's a very difficult experience, but once you've done it multiple times, you recognize that on the other side of that temporary pain is the next version of yourself. And when you
Yeah.
stand on the old version of yourself, you can you're not like, oh, I wake up tomorrow and I'm this different person and I do everything differently and I make decisions differently. It's it's like a baby walking for the very first time. My daughter, the lessons that you learn from children are incredible, but my daughter, when I watched her start to walk for the very first time, I said, oh, she's going from crawling to walking. She's stepping into
Mm.
the next version of herself for the very first time. But does that mean that she's not going to fall? Does that mean that she's not going to crawl still? Does that mean that she's actually not going to be a little bit clunky? No, it doesn't. And you don't yell at the baby for crawling. You don't yell at the baby for tripping and falling and being clunky. So, as
Mm.
yourself, as whatever age you're at, recognize that you are just that baby. And when you step into the next version of yourself, you're not going to know how to speak differently the very first time. You're not going to know how to walk differently the very first time. It's going to be extremely clunky. And that's where it's painful. And that's where it's easier to just go back to sleep. But
Mm.
you are that baby. Every time you step into that next version of yourself, like you are the baby. It's this
Well, the
new
metaphor
version.
knows no bounds, right? Like the
Yeah,
reparenting of all of it. Like I'm just sitting here thinking, and the baby doesn't fall down and say, like, oh, what's wrong with me? Right. The baby's
exactly.
like, okay, cool. Oh, my parents are saying, yay. Okay, great. Like,
Yeah,
somewhere along the line, we just so lose touch with what is, whether that's society. I mean, the woman who trained me in my therapy technique, dialectical behavioral therapy, talks a lot about like invalidating parenting and being sensitive and all of these factors. But my goodness, if you and I are not just evidence that you can rewrite the whole thing, and you
yeah.
can imperfectly.
I just got some serious chills, because it is imperfectly, but it is true that you can rewrite your story. And if we're not doing that until we take our last breath, I think that we're doing a disservice to ourselves. We're doing a disservice to our lineage. We're doing a disservice to future generations,
Oh,
because
yeah.
That's the only way that we actually, like, we all want the world to be different, right? Like, we look
Well, if
outside,
we're
we're like,
awake enough, I think there are people who are just have, and this is sort of what my quote is always about my darkness, which is that my life felt like the size of a postage stamp. Like the hallway was just, I couldn't even walk through a hallway. So I think usually, yes, we want the world to be better if we even have the capacity to think outside of ourselves and this like scarce need. Like, that
yeah,
was how I was. I was like, I don't
the,
care about anybody else. I don't have what I need. And I had everything I needed and more.
yeah. The only way it does change, though, is it, when we start to change ourselves, and then we start to change our environments and the people that we surround ourselves with. We're like, oh, like, I want to subscribe to that way of living. I want to actually start changing myself as well. And like, the number one place for most of this to start is like just in the walls of the businesses that we show up to on a day-to-day basis. Like, you spend so many hours working. How do we like culturally change? Well, it changes here, and then it changes in the groups that we spend the most time around, a lot of times at work. And then it can start to ripple out into the world. It's not like all of a sudden the world changes and then we all start to change. It starts here and then ripples outwards.
Yeah, but here's my
And
guess about you. I could
yeah,
be wrong. I mean, it's really,
I love this podcast.
I'm having so much fun. I bet you surround yourself with people who, like, that thing that they say the 5 people you spend the most time with are the most impactful. I bet your 5 people are fine characters. So mine are, forget it.
Yeah.
And I'm doing a little reshuffle right now. I'm really leveling. Boy, this woman I'm working with on some of my stuff right now, she said, there's some parts of my life where I fight below my weight, which, for an eating disorder person really screwed with my head, but I understood the metaphor enough. I could get it.
Ah,
I was like, what does that mean? So I'm doing some reshuffling, but I would imagine, because listen, I mean, this is about consumption in its own way, right? Like what you consume, I imagine, is largely positive and
yeah.
in alignment for you.
Yeah. Mike, some of my closest, I've been in a men's group for the last,
Oh, I
it's
love
been a
that.
little over 3 years.
What is a
And
men's group for those listening? I mean, we gotta like, I mean,
yes,
that's all I want to know about. I want to go to a men's group so badly.
be a fly on the wall.
I literally, like, if you said, okay, like, you have one thing in life, I'd be like, can I go sit on the outskirts of a men's group just for like one time?
Yeah. We had the men's group operates by an ethos. Like, we operate by a rule book
How'd you
that
find it? Hold on, back up. We're making it too hard for everybody. This is what I mean about
so,
you. Like, I guarantee, like, you meditate, you breathe. Like, people need to know what you do. Cause in a way, I don't ever like it to, you and I are both people who like wanted to end our lives. And we're here like, hey, like awareness. Yeah. Anthony about like, there's always this little part of me that's like, don't make it seem too easy. Cause then people
yeah.
will shut this thing down. I
Yeah,
work
thank
really
you.
hard at staying
Yeah.
healthy. I'm a high maintenance, healthy person. I
Yeah.
got to breathe. I
Yeah.
got to meditate. I got to eat the right food. I mean, you have no idea. Well, you probably have an idea. You have to work
Yeah.
hard at it too. I don't think of it as hard work. I just think
Not
about it as
anymore.
right.
Not anymore. It's been 11 years. I've spent the last 11 years since I almost committed suicide till today. I'm 32 years old now.
Mm.
And I have spent the last 11 years with the first 5 of them being like intense bodybuilding. So imagine being like so disciplined that
Mm.
my food's perfect, my workouts are perfect, and like, don't like act like don't think that that's good, but
Oh, I
know
don't.
that
I'm an
taught
eating
me. And
disorders
for
therapist.
anybody that's listening to, like, that
No
wasn't
one's
good, but
thinking
it
that.
taught
Everyone's like,
me
whoa.
it taught me how to control what I can control, and that's
Mm.
it. And I completely understand how um that can be very negative, especially from an eating disorder perspective. Like, we want to control everything. And so
But you're
during
right.
that
Listen, I think there are some people where that works really. This is what I mean. Like, not all psychotropic meds are bad. Like, and then there's some
right.
people who take cannabis and it doesn't work for them either. If I want to do one thing in this world, I just want everyone to like get their grips off everything because we never will
Yeah.
try something else because we get
Yeah.
so into this toxic tribalism that is so easy to get into in this world because everybody's so lost.
Yeah. The things that I do now, so I've been meditating for a little over 11 years.
What kind of meditation? What do you do?
I did TM a
Me
lot in the
too.
beginning,
Yeah, me too.
and now it's just, I'm a huge proponent for just So Michael Singer, the author who wrote
I
The
mean,
Untethered Soul
yeah.
and,
How could he
The
not come into
Surrender
our
Experience.
conversation? Now that we have everybody, right? So now we have Michael Singer, Anthony DeMello, Joseph Campbell. It's the trifecta is here.
Yeah.
They have arrived.
It's when the first time I read The Untethered Soul, my wife actually gave me the book. And in the beginning of our relationship, it was really choppy. And she gave me the book and she goes, I would love for you to read this and for us to have a conversation on it. And the book really opens up like, you are not your thoughts. You're the observer of your thoughts. And if we just stop for a second there, and we go, oh, okay. So all of those stories that are running through our head that tell us who we are or what we're supposed to do or what we did bad, all those things, those are thoughts.
Yeah.
And you are
Don't you
not
wish
those
they came
thoughts.
in a different, I just wish they came in like a different voice. Like
Yeah.
if it was like Mickey Mouse or like Darth Vader, I'd be like, oh, okay, hey, not listening to you today. But like it's
Okay, that's not me.
right, like, okay, I'm definitely not Darth Vader. But like they just
Yeah.
sound like me. And then I'm
They
like,
sound
wait,
like
like,
you.
am I a horrible person? Like, should I eat this bucket of oats? Like, no. What's happening? And I feel for me, it's sometimes hard to find my center. I do think practice, which is just see what I mean. Practice is not all that marketable. I'm like, just
Yeah,
time.
it's not at
Time
all.
takes
And
and
so
patience.
it was, so actually my therapist, my
You
very
sound like
first
Michael
therapist,
Singer. Your whole story sounds like Michael's. I love that. What's the book he wrote? The one
The
he wrote.
Surrender Experiment.
Yes, what a great
Yeah,
book.
it's so
You're
good.
the beginning of your story sounds like that.
That's what it is though. And he so my very first therapist, Joseph, he just taught me how to breathe. He said, lay
Mm,
flat on the floor and breathe and notice your belly expanding and contracting. And every time you feel a thought come in and you're not focusing on your breath, just let the thought go. And he didn't call it meditation. He just called it breathing exercises. And so
mm,
it wasn't till years down the road till I actually started using like Headspace or meditation apps. I
right.
was like, oh, like that's what he was teaching me. And then
I've
I
been doing
and I
this for
used
years.
EM for a little while. And now, honestly, my meditation practice has been more fluid in that sometimes it's a walking meditation, sometimes it is a seated meditation. And then now for me, I still get anxious. Like I'm running a multi-million-dollar business. I have a bunch of employees. I have a family. I have responsibility, and I get anxious. Like it's like this is a lot.
I'd hope
And
so.
so for me, a lot of times now, or most of the times now, like my way of becoming fully present is I get in a 38-degree bucket of water
You do?
and I do cold plunges every single morning, and that's just like the instant like
Wait, we have to explain what a
shock.
cold plunge is. Also,
Yes.
obviously, I'm like in pre-contemplation on cold plunging. So here you are, my angel. Okay. What is a cold plunge and what does it mean?
Yeah. So a cold plunge is a cold body of water that you immerse yourself in and you stay in until you can't any longer. And that can't any longer is very short in the beginning. It's
Right.
very, very short in the beginning, but it is a forced meditation because you can't think about anything besides, I feel like I'm going to die. And the only way to get through it is to breathe. So for me, for anybody really that
Well, also,
has,
it was the initial treatment of depression.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, Tim Ferriss taught me that. Yeah,
I believe it.
it was the initial form of treatment of depression. Not so marketable, that cold
Yeah.
water. But
Well,
yeah,
it's like,
and Winhoff
it's
and
the
all of that.
idea
Yeah.
it's the
That's
idea that we have to change our physical state to
mhm.
sometimes change our mental state.
I would
Sometimes it's
argue
not
we always have to change our because trauma lives in the body. I mean, trauma lives in the
can you just
body.
follow me around
We're
and
just
help me?
saying, like,
Yeah, yeah. No, it's so good though,
I've
but
been a
because it's
therapist
true.
so long and I'm sitting with people and I'm like, listen, us talking about this isn't going to help it anymore. We got to go get you trauma therapy. And that's in your body. The more we're talking about this, it actually might be making it worse.
Yeah,
All right.
it is because
I'm going to start doing cold showers for 3 minutes in the morning. I just said it out
yeah.
loud. It's going to happen.
Well, and because the thing is, you cannot think about anything else when you're in
Mm,
that place. And so it is the forced meditation. And the reason that I start every single day with it is because if I tell myself that if I start my
But you're
day
like
with,
fancy and you have a pool at your house. right?
Y-
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
I
not,
have,
I'm going to do it like a little less fancy and I'm just going to go in the shower because you can do
that's a
that
great place
too.
to start.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm excited about that.
That's where I started. And
Oh, okay.
then
And then you like
I
leveled up.
we have my company Cured has a partnership with the company The Plunge, and it's an actual like
Wow. I'm
bath
going to
that you
dare to
get
dream that
in.
maybe I'll have a partnership with the Plunge one day.
Yeah, well, I could hook you up with them.
Oh, okay. Wow. It's a great day.
And but I if you can start your if you can start your day with the thing that is what many of us would say is one of the hardest things possible. It's like the last thing that you want to do when you wake up is go get in freezing water. But if you can start your day with that, then as the day progresses, the difficult conversations, the difficult decisions, the things that scare you, those become a lot easier because you just went through a time in which you felt like it was death. It wasn't death, but it feels like it. And even
Hmm.
after you do it for, I mean, I've been pretty consistent for almost a year now.
Wow.
Even after, it's like still like the last thing that I want to do is like, I don't want to be freezing. I would love to curl up in a blanket and read a book in the morning.
There's
But like,
so many extra health benefits to it and
yeah, there
circulation
are.
too. It's great. Well, one of my teachers, like, I've never done it. I'm very resistant as a human. It takes me a really long time to get there. One of my teachers is like, stop taking such hot showers. I'm like, but I'm freezing. And
Right.
she was like, it doesn't help you to get warm by by doing warm things. It helps you to get warm by doing cold things. I mean, I'm going
Right.
to tell, I just, for those of you listening, my friend Primavera, who should probably come on the podcast, told me that I think 2 years ago. And today with Joe, I am making the change. All I'm saying, seeds get planted, they blossom when they're ready. This took me 2 years. I'm starting tomorrow.
Yeah. And it's like what I recognized is I think that there's just like culture around having like this perfect morning routine. But I
Oh,
think
yes.
what I've realized is that sometimes when I was trying to nail this perfect morning routine, I would actually get more frustrated at myself for not nailing the routine, and it would end up
Hmm.
ruining my day. So if it's just wake up, get in the cold water, and then go on with my day, the
Yeah.
forced meditation, it's way better for me. Like I've done all the things.
Yeah. I
And
remember when
so,
Tara Brock had her baby, and she's like, yeah, she's like a very famous meditation teacher.
mhm,
And she's just like, yeah, you know what? Sometimes it was about 30 seconds at the end of the bed, and then I would pass out. Like, yeah, that's the perfectionism's just so evil in that way. You know, it's its
yeah,
own form. It's the precursor to depression and anxiety. All right, let's talk about cured because you
yeah,
and I really we could have one of those like 5 hours. We could be like
I know.
Joe Rogan. We could be like 3 hours together. We haven't even
I'm gonna
gotten to
move
end.
my computer real quick. I'm about to get a glare, and I don't want
Oh,
to have a
I mean,
intense glare in my
oh.
camera. Yeah, so yeah, let's
So
talk about it.
let's talk. So you did this really great. How did you? So when you were sitting in the therapist office, and you were like, I have this idea, like where did it start? Like where did the little pieces start to form?
Yeah, so I actually had a podcast at the time, and the podcast was originally called Committed Physiques Radio. It was all like bodybuilders. It was literally competing. And what I recognized over the conversations was a lot of the people that were in this community were people that struggled with something in their life, then they turned to bodybuilding to help them move through it. I was like, okay, cool. This is helpful. It's helping a lot of people. And then living in Colorado, marijuana was legalized, and
Mm,
I became very interested in it because I could look back on my times where I was very destructive with all sorts of drugs and alcohol. And I could recognize that when I would use marijuana at that time, I would typically go hike, I would be creative, I would listen to music, I would I would be more tuning in when I was using cannabis.
mm.
And so when it was legalized, I still had a Xanax prescription at the time, and I still struggled with anxiety, and I was utilizing it. And I started using CBD, and I started talking about it outside of my podcast. I would talk about it on social media every once in a while. I was very careful about it because I was working for a federally funded company, and like
Right. And the government
there was a
hates
lot
things
of
that aren't meds.
yeah, yeah. We all know how that goes. And so people would ask me when I rebranded the podcast, I was like, this committed physiques thing, like this isn't serving me. It's really not serving people to how I want them to feel like they're served. So I rebranded it to Higher Health. And when it was rebranded to Higher Health, it was like, how are we elevating like and like actually creating a new level of true health? Like, what does health really mean? And like people would start to ask me like higher health, and you're talking about cannabis a lot. Are you talking about like being high? I was like, no, like that kind of came in weird, but like I see where you're coming from. Um, but we would talk about it off the podcast. So we would run a podcast and then they would ask me off of the podcast. They would say, how are you using cannabis to
Mm.
help you? And I would share with them. And then they would go, oh, like I've actually used it before, but I don't talk about it openly. And I would go, why aren't we having this conversation on the podcast? And I would go,
Mhm.
well, of course, because there's such a stigma around it, because people believe that if they were to share what they actually did, maybe cannabis, maybe plant medicine, whatever it is, and somebody were to hear that, they would then judge them because it carries this stigma, and then they would be completely misunderstood. They're like, oh, you're just a druggie, you're not spiritual bypassing, but you're bypassing something here.
Right.
And I was just like, no, like that's not right. That may be the case for some people, but if we don't have nuance here and we don't have a honest conversation, then we will never be able to change the narrative around cannabis. So I recognize that. And when I told my therapist that, he goes, I think you have a really good idea here. And I said, yeah, I just don't know how to like manifest what it looks like what the company looks like. And so I was using just like CBD tinctures at the time, which weren't very widely popular. It was 2016, and like 2018, 2019 was really when like the huge boom came.
Mhm.
But I saw the fitness industry, which was where I was making a lot of connections and a lot of people were changing their life in some way, not saying it
Mhm.
was the 100% right way. Then
There's
I
no
saw
such
the
thing as
cannabis
100% right
industry.
way, as we both know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I said, like, I feel like I can connect these two, because if people look to people that the right people that are changing their lives by properly um, utilizing nutrition and properly utilizing movement and exercise and meditation practice, whatever it might be, and those people use cannabis, then I think we can rebrand this, because
Mm.
people trust those people for the most
Right.
part if they're doing it correctly. And so that was where the idea came. I said, I'm going to start to create products and I'm going to infuse them into the health and fitness industry, and I'm going to rebrand cannabis. And that's how Cured became a thing. The name Cured comes from, we use functional mushrooms, adaptogens, cannabis. When you cultivate cannabis, you hang it upside down and you dry it and you cure it. It's the curing process. It's cured. So
Wow.
that's where the name comes from, is like
That's
the
deep.
herbs, the mushrooms, the cannabis. For them to be the most potent version of themselves, they have to go through that process. They have to go through the process of hanging and drying and expressing the components of them, the cannabinoids that truly have the benefit. So that's where the name came from. And in 2017, that's when I put in my letter of resignation after sitting with a therapist. And the company's evolved a lot since then. We create our own custom formulations. We work with a clinical herbalist. And, we talked about this in the beginning. We have form factors that one would look at that would say we look like a supplement company. But the reason that I say we are a supplement company of the future is because supplements used to look like, take your protein, take your pre-workout, take your amino
Mm.
acids, and take this and that. And like, I'm like, well, I'll tell you one thing. If you plop my company in the middle of the bodybuilding industry, we stand out like a sore thumb. So
Oh,
we are
yeah.
the future of the supplement industry. We are the future of what I believe people can utilize to truly optimize their lives and just take care of themselves. So that's Cured has been that. We're 5 years into the business and we're continually evolving and changing. But it's really founded on the power of nature. And we have this one line that includes all of our core values. Our core values are responsibility, service, and nature. We
Mm.
believe we have a responsibility to serve people by sharing the healing powers of nature. And that's what guides every single decision that we make every single day. And our mission is to truly show people that you can optimize your life, that you can change your life by utilizing nature. And we're here to help people do that by putting the right narrative out there, and products that I have put my heart and soul into.
Mm. You know, the Joseph Campbell quote is, you must give up the life you planned in order to have the life that is waiting for you. And
Mm.
not to like blow up your spot, but wow, if you're not doing that, I don't know who is.
Yeah, thank you.
Pretty
That really
amazing.
means a lot. And
Well, I'm not that nice. I'm just accurate. So that's part of my charm. I'm
I
kind
found
of
my
nice. I can
my
be
new
nice.
best friend today. I like, we live in this world where like we used to be like being direct and being honest is like shunned upon.
Yeah.
That serves nobody.
Yeah. That's why
Nobody
I'm a
at
good
all.
therapist, though. Everyone knows, she's only pushing me
No
that way
bullshit.
because,
Yeah.
what are we still here to do each other's hair? No, we're here to change the world and break out of these molds and this like sleep. Oh, we didn't get to sleep. I wanted to talk to you about that so badly. Well, maybe you'll come on again because I
Yeah.
just think you're so wonderful. I had
Thank you.
something else I wanted to. Oh, did you ever see Finding Joe, the weirdest, best movie on the face of the earth?
No.
Come on now. Okay, well, I have a lot of homework from our time together. For example, my new cold plunge and getting
Yep.
back into Anthony DeMello. And everybody listening, Finding Joe is it's such a weird little kind of poorly made movie, but it's all about Joseph Campbell. It's all about the hero's journey.
Okay.
It's delightful. It's an hour of your
Yeah.
time. I mean, it's
Is it on
everything you
Netflix?
know. I don't know
I'll
where it
find it.
is.
I'll find
It's
it.
somewhere, but it's delightful. One of my great favorite therapists on earth, Brad Reedy. It's his favorite movie. If you don't know anything, it's really a good starting point for what me and Joe are talking about right now. I will put that in the show notes. I'm so into show notes right now. Can you tell?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just kind of discovered them. I just used to like write them in. I was like, oh, I can use these even better. Well, you're delightful. I'm so glad you gave us like this wonderful 20% off, and that'll be in the show notes. And we're really grateful for it. And yeah, I'm just grateful you exist. You kind of give me hope. So thanks for that
Thank you.
too.
Thank you. Did we make it Molly or Molly 20? I can't remember.
Oh, I don't remember, but I'll say
We
it in
need
the
to,
intro. So no worries about
yeah,
it.
we need to figure that out. Um, but yeah, I appreciate that. And I think the one thing that's really important is that we, if you, if I can be, oh, we made it craving. It's craving.
Oh, what a good
20%
one.
off craving. A lot of us can intellectualize concepts, and I'm one of those peoples. I can intellectualize and understand things that people write and teachings. But just like I shared in the beginning, if you can intellectualize and understand and have learned, but you don't implement, if there's the gap between the two, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
So there's so many examples nowadays where it's just like regurgitation, and like, oh yeah, like I understand this, and like I can sound really smart. And I just want to say that like the only reason that I've been able to start to create the life that I want to is actually to understand and then to implement. And like the awareness that we talked about is like
Mm.
you have to understand it and then you actually have to make it happen. If you're just going to regurgitate and intellectualize a concept, you're probably going to drive yourself into a darker hole unless you're living in integrity to what those learnings and teachings actually are. Because when you recognize that there's a distance and you're like, I'm supposed to do this, but I'm still showing up this way, we're never going to change. So I just,
Well, fear is such a bitch. And I think I've heard so many people say, I just don't feel ready. And like, I read this quote somewhere, I forget where, but it's like, ready is an action. It's not a feeling. And it like
yeah,
blew my mind off. Like, you don't have to be ready to go do something. Like,
yeah,
and that's
yeah.
where
I
like
actually saw that you posted
perfectionism.
that. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
thanks.
true. It's
Gosh, I'm
true.
really working hard on social media. Talk about not being ready, just going and doing something.
Yeah.
You're wonderful. Thanks for just brightening my day. My heart is
Thank
so
you.
full from this
Thank you.
conversation. It's just so lovely. I hope everybody
Yeah.
enjoyed it as much as I do.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure to connect with you. And yeah, the company's Cured Nutrition, curednutrition.com. And if
Yeah,
you're
it's
looking for
so
me on
good.
Instagram, it's Joseph, Joseph, Sheehey. And
You're
happy
such a
to
better
reach
host
out
than
and
me. Thank
talk to
you for
anybody.
reminding me to ask that question.
That's
I'm so like enlightened from our conversation. I forgot to promote you, but I'm going to
that's
promote.
okay.
I think you can tell that about me. I'll probably really hardcore promote you for the rest of my life now. Well, thanks, friend,
Yeah,
for coming
thank
on
you,
the
Molly. It's a
show.
pleasure to connect with you.
Okay. See you soon.
See you soon.